Hey, we are going to talk about hand ties today, and you guys already should have some familiarity with how to do hand ties, but we're going to put a slight little spin on the conventional way that you guys have been taught to do the one and the two-handed surgical hand ties. Specifically, we are going to discuss today how you do these hand ties in a different way of thinking about them for when your incision is not parallel to the surgeon, but yet is oriented in a perpendicular manner. And this is going to have more applicability to when you're actually closing up the flank of, say, a standing animal. That is really common in bovine C-sections, bovine DAs, and exploratories, those types of procedures where you have an incision that's either oriented away from you or oriented up and down. Because up to this point in time, most of what you guys have been doing hand ties on, and suturing in general, have incisions that are oriented in a parallel direction to the surgeon. For the demonstrations today, we are going to use the all-familiar suture board, and I've got a piece of rope here. This rope is actually colored, and most importantly, I would just want to mention that this end of the rope right here, and hopefully it's in focus in the camera, but there's a little red end, and this is going to represent our needle today. So we've got a needle end, and then we've got the end that's not attached to the needle opposite. The end that is attached to the needle, or the end that's fixed to the needle, is called the fixed end. The opposite end that's not attached to the needle is called the free end. Sort of a general principle when you're doing hand ties is that when you're tying your knot, you never want the needle to pass through the loop, because that's dangerous. It increases the risk that you're going to poke yourself. And also, to conserve suture, we usually have the fixed end along with the excess suture material bunched up in one of our hands, or at least together. We don't want to have all of the excess suture material as the free end, because after you finish tying your knot, the excess suture that's not attached to the knot is going to be cut off, and you want to leave a fair length of suture attached to the needle so then it can be useful to you. If you end up having all of this bunch of suture, that's the free end. After you tie your knot, you're going to cut it off, and then you're going to have this little short tag on the end of your needle and this long piece of suture without a needle that may be useless if you actually need the needle to get through the tissue. So, fixed end attached to the needle, free end not attached to the needle.
So why would we perform a one-handed versus a two-handed tie, and why do we need to know both of them? Well, first of all, it is important to note that we never want the needle to pass through the loop of the hand tie, because this is dangerous and you could risk poking yourself. Secondly, usually the fixed end of the suture is balled up in one hand, and this is the excess suture, and it becomes very cumbersome if all of this suture material is passed through the loop as well. And so depending on where the suture is and where the fixed and the free end of the suture is may dictate which hand tie is going to be most appropriate to avoid these things. So how do we decide whether we're going to perform the one or the two-handed tie? Well, in the conventional method that you have already learned, where the incision is oriented parallel to the surgeon, the first thing that we talk about is that the end of the suture that's nearest you is going to be held in the dominant hand. For me, this is my right hand. Therefore, the suture that is away from you is going to be held in your non-dominant hand. Secondly, if the free end of the suture is in your dominant hand, or i.e. the end of the suture that is near you, if that happens to be the free end of the suture, then we are going to do a two-handed tie. Alternatively, if the free end of the suture is in your non-dominant hand, or another way of looking at this, if the free end of the suture is away from you or on the far side, then we are going to do a one-handed tie. This method of deciding between the one and the two-handed tie works great when the incision is oriented like this, or parallel to the surgeon. However, we need a new convention when we are working on incisions that are oriented like this, or perpendicular to the surgeon. So let's begin by reviewing the hand ties in the convention that you have already learned them, with the incision oriented parallel to the surgeon. We will first go over the two-handed tie, and then we will go over the one-handed tie. So let's begin by taking the fixed end of the suture with the excessive suture material bunched up in our non-dominant hand. And that fixed end of the suture is going to be on the far end of the incision, while the free end is going to come out on the near end of the incision. Let's review two fundamental hand positions used when performing the two-handed tie. These will be hand positions assumed by the non-dominant hand. The surgeon will alternate between these two hand positions with each successive throw. The first hand position I like to refer to as the pistol grip. The pistol grip is performed when the non-dominant hand, or when the fixed end of the suture, is on the side away from or opposite the surgeon. With the pistol grip, the index finger is pointing forward and the thumb is extended back and pointing upward. The other hand position I like to refer to as the hitchhiker's grip. The hitchhiker's grip is assumed by the non-dominant hand when the fixed end of the suture is on the side near the surgeon. With the hitchhiker's grip, the thumb is extended back while the wrist is rotated so that the palm is facing downward. We're doing the two-handed tie. We've got the fixed end of the suture in my non-dominant hand. It's on the far side of the incision, and I am starting out in that hand with a pistol grip. So my finger looks like it's the barrel of a pistol, and we're shooting to the right. All right, so now we've got this suture, this rope, that's coming down over my index finger. It's really important when you do hand ties is that when you cross the suture, it always crosses in an opposite direction. And so we've got this suture coming down, we've got this suture going up over the finger. It won't work if you have both suture lines coming in the same direction. So, pistol grip, suture coming down, we cross so that the other rope is going up over that and crossing in an opposite direction. After we have this thumb and index finger come together, we rotate around, grab that free end of the suture, and we pull the free end of the suture through, and we tighten down that throw. So now the second hand position is going to be what I refer to as the hitchhiker grip. So we've got our thumb back like we're hitchhiking, and we've got this suture that's coming up over that thumb. So if we've got this suture coming up over the thumb, this next suture is going to come down over the thumb to cross it. Again, this won't work. So we're crossing that. Again, with the two-handed tie, thumb and index finger together, rotate around, pull the free end of the suture through, and that completes the second square throw, or the first square knot. And then we repeat. Again, my fixed end of the suture is on the opposite side of the incision, so I'm going to revert into the pistol grip, cross, Thumb and forefinger, grab the free end of the suture, pull it through. Another square throw. Hitchhiker grip. Thumb and forefinger together. And that is the second square knot. So this completes the two-handed tie in the conventional method where the incision is oriented parallel to the surgeon. Let's see how this works when the incision is not oriented parallel, but yet oriented perpendicular, or this could be up and down. So now our convention with the suture that's on the near side or far side doesn't apply anymore, because I really don't have a near side and a far side. I have a right side and I have a left side, but I don't have a near, far, or towards me and away from me. Those references do not apply anymore. So what I typically use as my convention is, if the fixed end of the suture is in my dominant hand, I do a one-handed tie. If the fixed end of the suture, and hence the associated stowed away excessive suture material, is in my non-dominant hand, then I will do a two-handed tie. So how does this work? So we're going to start with the two-handed tie. So I've got the excess suture material and all of this suture material that's stowed away in my non-dominant hand, or my left hand, and it basically is almost identical now to what we've taught you with the conventional method where the incision is oriented in the other direction. So we're going to start out with a pistol grip. We're going to take our free end of the suture. We're going to cross. Thumb and forefinger come together, rotate around, pull that free end through, and that completes the first throw. Hitchhiker grip. Pull the suture, the free end of the suture, down over the thumb, and realize this is going up over the thumb, this comes down over the thumb. Thumb and index finger come together, rotate around, pull the free end of the suture through, and that completes the second square throw, or the first square knot. And we're always alternating between the pistol grip and the hitchhiker grip. So pistol grip, free end of the suture crosses, thumb and forefinger come together, hitchhiker grip, thumb and forefinger. So that completes the second square knot. Let's go over the one-handed tie. As with the two-handed tie, we will begin using the method that you should be familiar with, where the incision is oriented parallel to the surgeon. As we've taught you before, the needle and the fixed end of the suture is stowed away in your dominant hand, and if you're doing the one-handed tie, this would be near you, so on the side of the incision that's closest to you. Next, our non-dominant hand is holding the free end of the suture, and this is away from you, or on the side of the incision that is furthest from you. And we're going to begin also with a pistol grip. Now, there's a difference this time between the pistol grip that we are using for the one-handed tie versus the pistol grip that we used for the two-handed tie. Notice that this time the pistol grip, even though it's still in my non-dominant hand, or my left hand in this case, it is actually holding the free end of the suture. So the fixed end of the suture is in my dominant hand, the pistol grip is my non-dominant hand, and that is the end with that is the hand that's holding the free end of the suture. So we've got the pistol grip, the rope's coming down over my index finger, and then with the end of the suture, I'm never going to pass that needle through, but with the fixed end of the suture, I am going to pull that up and cross my index finger that's in the pistol formation. We're going to just sort of lift up, create a little loop with my thumb that is in my non-dominant hand, and then with that index finger, I'm just going to sweep the rope through to form my first square throw. Now, I struggle a little bit figuring out how to best term the next hand position, and with the next hand position, my non-dominant hand is basically going to flip up the free end of the suture, and so I'm going to call it the flipped grip. All right, so we've got the flipped grip. We've got this free end of the suture that's going up over all four fingers, and then the fixed end of the suture is going to come down over three of those fingers. Again, we're going in opposite directions. So this suture is going up, this suture is coming down. With my middle finger, I'm going to pull back, and with my fingernail, we're going to sweep that up under, and that completes the first square knot. Each successive throw has alternating hand position. So now we go back into the pistol grip. We come up over, thumb raises that, flips it down, and that's my next square throw. We go into a flip grip, suture comes down, and that completes my second square knot. Let's see how this works when the incision is oriented perpendicular to the surgeon. So my convention is that I use the one-handed tie when the needle and the fixed end of the suture is bunched up in my dominant hand. So that's my convention for the one-handed tie. And similarly, I begin this with the pistol grip in the non-dominant hand holding the free end of the suture. Cross, flip that up, and that completes the first throw. We go into a flip grip, down, second throw, or the first square knot. We go back into the pistol grip formation, cross, the third throw, flipped up, down, and the middle finger sweeps that under, and that completes the second square throw and the second square knot. Alternatively, using this method gives us a little bit more versatility. Using this method, we can actually do a two-handed tie even if the fixed end of the suture is coming out towards us. But this time, we are going to begin with the hitchhiker grip. So remember, with the other way that you learned the two-handed tie, you began that with the pistol grip but was on the opposite side. This time, the fixed end of the suture is nearest you, and you're going to begin with this hitchhiker grip. So we've got the hitchhiker hand configuration. We bring the free end of the suture down, thumb and forefinger, rotate around, and that's one throw. Next, we've got the pistol grip, cross, thumb and forefinger, Hitchhiker. And again, 4 square throws. And it doesn't matter whether you begin with the Hitchhiker or whether you begin with the pistol grip, as long as we're alternating in between with each successive throw.
Similarly, using this new convention, we can even do a one-handed tie when the fixed end of the suture is on the side opposite the surgeon.
So in this case, we've got the fixed end of the suture in the stowed suture material away from us. We've got the free end of the suture near us, and we can do a one-handed tie in this situation. Now, the difference between this and the conventional method that you've learned is that the second step where the flipped grip is used actually becomes our first step now. And it really doesn't matter whether you begin with the pistol grip or whether the pistol grip is the second step. But it does matter that the important thing is that you alternate between each grip with each successive throw. So how does this look? So we're going to begin now with this flipped grip. And so now the suture is going up over those 4 fingers. The other suture comes down, middle finger comes around, and that's the first throw. Now, for the second throw, we go into the pistol grip. And so now the suture's coming down, the suture's going up, thumb flips that suture up, and that's the second throw. Flip, back to pistol grip, and that completes 2 square knots using the one-handed tie. I thought it would be useful just to go over some of the common mistakes that I see students making when they're first learning to do hand ties. Probably the most common mistake that I see made is that we have the suture that goes the same way over the fingers. And this can be in any of the hand formations that we talked about. So, for example, if I was doing a pistol grip for the one-handed tie, the suture would come down over that index finger, and the correct way to do it is to cross like that with the new suture going up. Now, if I have this fixed end of the suture here that comes down over as well, then what ends up happening is it just falls apart and it doesn't work. So it really needs to, if this is coming down, this needs to cross like that, and then you can flip it up and do a square throw. You can also have this problem in the Hitchhiker hand position as well. And so with the Hitchhiker hand position, it looks like this for the two-handed tie, and the other suture should come down and cross in opposite directions. If you cross in the same direction, when you put your thumb and forefinger together, there's nothing to grab. It just doesn't really make sense. Whereas if you cross it, then thumb and forefinger grabs, you come down and pull that free end of the suture up. And that would be the correct way to do it. But it needs to cross in opposite directions. This can also happen with the flipped grip. And so now this is the second part. We already have one throw. This is the second part of the one-handed tie. The suture's coming up over those 4 fingers. This suture needs to come down over those 3. If you come up over those fingers, then that's what results, and it is not a useful throw. So the suture always needs to go in opposite directions over each of those hand positions. The other mistake that I see students making with this flipped grip is instead of coming down over just 3 fingers like that, they try to come down over all 4 fingers. And while this in theory could still work, it just makes it a little bit more cumbersome, because as you try to manipulate this middle finger to get this other suture, the free end of the suture, to flip under, if you are coming down over all 4 fingers, it's likely that you're going to drop those sutures. So if you can come down over just these 3, you can continue to keep a good grip on the end of the free end of the suture with this thumb and forefinger, and you can hold on tight, and that way this middle finger can come down and flip that around a little bit more easily. Not alternating hand positions with each successive throw is another mistake that I see students making just starting out. It is vitally important that you alternate between hand positions with each successive throw. If you repeat the same hand position with 2 successive throws, you will not end up with a square knot. So I hope that you found this video helpful to think of an alternative way to think about the surgical hand ties. And especially, I hope you found it useful to think about tying hand ties when your incision is not oriented in the traditional parallel manner, but yet is oriented in a perpendicular or vertical manner. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.